love to say right out of the gate, as the station and Steiny and Evan did an awesome job celebrating the anniversary of the hiring of Steve Kerr. I'd like to say it this way. This man is incredibly underappreciated. And I find it frustrating, to be honest with you, as a Warrior fan. Mike Malone, the head coach of the Denver Nuggets, a couple of days ago sat up at a press conference, and granted, he got frustrated with a reporter, and the Timberwolves were screaming behind the wall, and that's what got all the attention. But Malone indicated that the Denver Nuggets had a hard time this time around in the playoffs because of exhaustion, because they had played until June last year and therefore did not get a normal offseason. And not lost on all of us Warrior fans. Right, this team did that for like 6 straight years and never got to use that as an excuse, never did use that as an excuse. We're playing way more basketball games than all the other teams. And then they would come back and do it again, come back and do it again. And they would do it with big names. And then they became bigger names. Remember, when Steve Kerr took over, you just said it. Steph didn't have that coach firing juice yet. They weren't champions yet. They were Steph, they were Clay, they were an interesting young backcourt. Draymond Green was not even much of a thought in anyone's mind, and Kevin Durant played for the OKC Thunder. And Andre Iguodala played for the Nuggets. Okay? That's what was going on when Steve Kerr took over. And for my taste, too often, I hear Warrior fans, or any NBA fan, treat Steve Kerr as if anybody could have coached that team. Who the hell couldn't have coached that team to a championship? Well, I'd argue you may have a tiny bit of a point once they got there.
Right.
How'd they get there? How did they get there? And so while we've taken so many calls in the last few months about the Klay Thompson discussion, which always goes back and forth, got to get younger, got to move on. And then the big Warrior fans will come back and be like, where's your loyalty? Where's your appreciation for Klay Thompson? I'd like to ask that to certain Warrior fans today, because I think that Steve Kerr has taken a lot of negativity this year. I think a lot of it. And I'd like to know why it is that you don't think that Steve Kerr is an absolute gem of a Hall of Fame coach, and the Warriors would not have done all of this without him. And to sit here and start to fine-tune it like, well, I don't like that Kuminga's not quite getting enough minutes.
Right.
And think of it, man. How many times have we taken calls where people are like, got to move on. Got to move on from Steve Kerr. Got to get a real coach. Got to get a real coach in here. Amazes me, man. Amazes me. This guy's been phenomenal from start to finish, whenever the hell finish ends up being.
Yeah, and the finish will be hopefully after Steph is done and Draymond's done and he's done. And at that point, you're going to turn the page in a number of different ways. And so fine, if that's the way it goes, then so be it. But you look at what they've done, and as far as what you were talking about with Michael Malone and how hard it is to play again from June to June, Steph Curry has played 32 games in his career in the month of June. Think about that.
It's crazy.
32 games in June. That's almost half a season of just basketball in the NBA Finals. So, yes, Michael, you're not wrong. When you play deep in June and you have to come back the next year, it's hard, but this Warrior team did it year after year.
That comment is right here. Here's Mike Malone. This is on Sunday night after the Denver Nuggets had a 20-point halftime lead in the fourth quarter on their own floor, high at altitude, and those Wolves just came running back and stole the Western Conference semifinals from them.
And those that know me, I'm not an excuse maker. The better team won, so I'm taking nothing away from Minnesota. But when you look at the fact that all the teams that are still playing, we played into June last year, a lot of basketball. And then we had to play our guys, our main guys, unlike last season, through game 82 to secure the number 2 seed. Whereas last year we were able to rest down the stretch. And I think the run last season and coming back and, you know, the amount of minutes that our starters had to play, I think mentally, emotionally, physically, I think guys are gassed. They're dead tired. They gave me everything I could ever ask for.
I don't want to blow that off. He's in that locker room. He knows. And sure, Sure, guys are gassed, but that is an interesting comment. Through the history of the NBA, teams usually hang around for a little while when they get to championship contention. It is not normal what's happening right now. 6 different champions in 6 years. That's not the norm. As we talked about yesterday, it hasn't happened since the mid to late 70s. So normally when a team wins a title or comes close, I'm not saying they repeat. Repeating is really hard. But it's not the norm that you win, then remain healthy, then remain a high seed, and then duck out in round 2. Like that's not the norm. So to say, hey, my guys were gassed, right. Everybody's always gassed. Like the team that is Boston not gassed? Where's Boston gone the last 2 years?
They're 8-2 in the playoffs, so they've had a lot of rest. Denver had to go deep into 7 games. So
they had to, or they did?
No, they had to because they played a better team than what Boston's faced.
Well,
so you can say had to or they did. You can look at it however you want to look at it. But what Michael Malone is saying is that they were gassed, and one reason why they're gassed is because they don't have a great bench.
Yeah, I mean,
and Boston is 8-2 in the playoffs, and they've had 11 days off over their 2 series?
Denver had a 5-game series in round 1. I mean,
and then they had an absolute knockdown drag out where they fell down 2-0 against Minnesota.
That's a 7-game series. That happens. The Warriors played those.
Yeah.
They had 7-game series.
Not a ton of them, not in the second round.
And then they went and won the next one. To get to round 2 in a game 7, this literally was only your 12th playoff game.
Right.
And blame 9 months ago. Again, you're allowed to do it. But there have been so many teams before you that have had the exact same assignment and have not ducked out because of fatigue. That's all I'm saying.
And he gave credit to Minnesota. He wasn't saying they lost because they were tired. He said Minnesota's a great team, and that's the factor. If you want to look at the Warriors' runs to their championship and whether or not they played as tough a team in the second round as Minnesota was, it's not really that conversation, but Minnesota is a very good opponent for Denver. They match up well with Denver. And if you look at Denver's minutes throughout the course of the year, they didn't play 9 and 10 guys all year. They played mainly 8 guys. And so, you got to the end of it and you got tired. Is that an excuse? No, it's the reality that you didn't have a deep team.
Yeah, well, and who's at fault for that is one question. And this isn't even about the Denver Nuggets. And none of us were sitting here saying Minnesota's impossible to beat prior to this series. Now we feel that way because they won it. To me, this is more about the achievements of the Warriors through the years and the fact that they've largely been underappreciated. There are a lot of people after Steve Kerr right now, and I don't think that it's warranted, even if some of the points they make on a smaller level are real. We've said it. I don't think Steve had a perfect year. You know who else said it? Steve.
Right.
Steve said it. It gets really, really challenging. But to take those little decisions in the moment, oh my gosh, he left Moody out, and be like, need a new coach.
Right.
Come on. Dude, take a moment. Today's the day to do it. And look at what has happened the last 12 years. And for me, I like what I call for, acknowledge that not just anybody could have done it. Worst thing that happened to Steve Kerr, for 2 reasons, was that his back was so debilitating that it must have been absolute hell for him, combined with the fact that Luke Walton walked in and never lost a basketball game.
Right.
And everyone went, yep, anybody can do this. It's that's not fair. You snapshotted 30 games.
24-0.
When the Warriors were at their absolute highest power, and Steve had so much to do with bringing them there. That's what allowed them to be a power, was because of so many of the things that he did and set up.
Anybody could just sit there and coach that team. Honestly, Mark, I mean, come on. What are we doing here? I'm just kidding.
I do.
And I think if you look at the longest tenured coaches in the league, you look at Popovich and you look at Spoelstra and you look at Steve Kerr and you realize there's a reason why those coaches have won as much as they've had, because they're good coaches. It's not as easy as, just sit there and coach great players. If so, Mark Jackson would still be here.
Yep. 888-957-9570. Brandon Pajemski in less than 10 minutes. Let's take a couple calls. Junior in Pacifica. Hey, Junior, on with Willard and Dibs. What's up?
Hey, gentlemen. Two two separate comments. First of all, it's easy with Mike Malone. Just stop whining. Don't whine when someone shoves a microphone in your face, and your life will be better. When two teams trade big victories like those two teams did, though, you know what that usually points to as the X factor is coaching. So he shouldn't be talking about his players being tired. He should be looking in the mirror. He's making it look like his team overachieved last year, and that's not what you want to be doing for them or yourself. Speaking of overachieving, who did not overachieve but who achieved is Steve Kerr. The only interesting question to me he is a great coach, and he has done, other coaching and so on. However, he's not a journeyman coach where he coached 6 teams in 20 years and you can do comparables and look at his record. He was a perfect fit for the Warriors, and let's just call him a genius for finding a fit. Through a rough process, he almost went to the Knicks, but for finding a fit that was great for him as a three-point shooter, as an outsider player who could bring that knowledge and expertise to his one-on-one coaching, as well as his strategizing, assemble a team of coaches, as well as a team of players. Did so many things well. There's always going to be a question mark. What if he tried it with 3 or 4 other teams who weren't as great a fit for him? What would have happened? We just can never know, but it doesn't take away from the amazing.
Whoop, we lost you. Oh, there you are. Yeah, and Junior, good call. Fully agree. This is not, I hope it doesn't sound like I've now decided that the Warrior dynasty was only Steve Kerr. I wouldn't even call him the most important piece. I'd probably give that to Steph Curry, but
nice.
You know what I'm saying?
Going out on a limb there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But he had a lot to do with this, and yes, the fit is a big part of it. Like what goes on in my mind when I hear that, I don't like it when we discredit people just because they end up in the right spot. You still have to achieve. You still have to be smart. You still have to be talented. You still have to do things that others can't do. Steve Kerr's in a great fit. Yeah, so's Brock Purdy. Yep.
Right.
And yes, he still gets the credit for handling those situations because they're not as easy as they look from the outside.
Jimmy Garoppolo was also in a good fit, but he didn't look as good as Brock does because he's not as good as Brock Purdy. And you could look at Steve Kerr and say, well, anybody could coach that team and do that well. Well, could they? Because it's not that easy to coach star players, especially when you start to win and the egos get big and you've got all these different pieces coming in and new players and you're trying to balance the young guys and you're trying to figure out how to make everything fit. It's a lot harder than he makes it look.
Well, and I mean, gosh, look at the career of Draymond Green. I know that there was, like many things, a little bit of a lucky break in there, which is that, it's just like the Giants right now. You're thrown in there because someone got hurt. Can you grab the baton and never give it up? Draymond did that. But, the elevator play that the Warriors run, like so perfect for Stephen Clay, he was able to do what great coaches do, and that is build a system around the assets that you have and maximize who they are and what they do. It's literally all that great coaches do. It's what Kyle Shanahan does with quarterbacks. We have this perception that coaches come in and they're like, we do it this way. Now fit into it. I mean, who was it we were talking to just at the event the other day about how Kyle Shanahan and his dad totally revamped an offense they had never run before for RG3, right? Steve Kerr did that. He did that. He did that for these guys.
And that's what any leader does in any organization. You come in and you see what you have talent-wise and personnel-wise, and you try to fit the people into what you're trying to do, and you change your system based on what you have in terms of your talent.
The man's under